Hello and welcome to the Fibre Guys Corner with me, your host, Adam Foster. Today we are going to be covering the topic of using a catalyst to recover. A lot of people have asked me in the past, and quite recently actually through email, well, what it is I actually mean when I say you need to use a catalyst to recover. So I thought this is a pretty good question to answer, so let's answer it. So to answer this question, we have to go back to the beginning of my journey, I suppose. So when I was originally ill, some number of years ago, what I found was that there wasn't a massive community on Facebook like there is these days. There was a very small amount of people in support groups, so there wasn't a lot of kind of ideas for treatments getting thrown at you or being suggested. So what you would have to do is sit for hours on a desktop with a horrendous migraine, searching the internet to try and find different things that worked. And what I found was after I tried pretty much everything going, I started to get more and more frustrated and pissed off because I knew some people in these support groups would, let's say, going to acupuncture or going to physio, and they were getting better. Yet whenever I tried it, I perhaps maybe got a small amount of relief that quickly dissipated, or I got no relief whatsoever. And I started to get more and more frustrated at this fact. So at the point the doctor had said, well, Mr. Foster, you've tried pretty much everything we have to offer you. The only thing I can suggest now is we look at medication again and we find a medication treatment plan that works for you as an individual. Well, I was having none of that because medication just didn't work for me. So I started to look at it slightly different. What I originally wanted to do was I wanted to change myself so that I could do treatment like physio or chiropractic or whatever else it was, and it would work for me. But to kind of get to that point, I needed to understand why treatments worked for some people, yet some treatments didn't for other people. And this is kind of where everything clicked in for me and how I ended up creating the framework that I work from now and creating the very thing that actually got me better and like 600 other people over the years. So my first port of call was I first looked at chiropractic care. And this was something that did actually give me a little bit of kind of relief. And I wanted to know why. Because some people it didn't work with, and some people it pretty much cured them of their symptoms. So I started to do a little bit of digging into the science of chiropractic, and remaining objective and quite unbiased, I dug. And what I found was actually the things that my chiropractor had been telling me weren't actually true. He had been telling me that my spine was misaligned, my hips were out, I had quarter inch difference between my leg lengths, and that what he was doing during these treatments was basically putting my spine back into place. Now when you look at the evidence, spines don't just become misaligned. I mean, they can very occasionally for people with like very high level connective tissue disorders like Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, but for the general population this doesn't happen. They've put thousands of people through MRI scans and we've never been able to find it. So I thought, well, why is he doing this then? And nowadays, my best friend Paul, he is a chiropractor, but he doesn't work from what you call the subluxation theory. This is where they think the spine becomes misaligned. He takes a much more bicycle approach, and there's some fantastic chiropractors out there who do stay evidence-based and kind of help people that way. But when you look at it, the subluxation theory isn't actually a thing. It doesn't happen. So I thought, right, well, what the hell is actually going on then? And when you dig into it, you've got to look at what an adjustment actually is. You're releasing gas from the joints. You're putting somebody's spine into a place that it hasn't been for a number of years, especially if you're hunched over in pain like I was. And more importantly, there's a lot of therapeutic alliance going on. There's a lot of trust going on. And the thing is, if you think about it, we are just brains that float in a dark tank. And we're totally deaf, dumb and blind to the world around us. Luckily, we have a nervous system that connects us to this less elasticated meat suit that we call a body. And through this nervous system, we can pull information from the outside in. So happiness, it doesn't come into your body, it's created by your brain. It's a real, 100% real experience. Just because it's made in your brain doesn't mean it's not real. So you can't have happiness come into your body, and the same is true with things like pain. Pain is not information into the nervous system. There are no pain receptors. pain receptors are a very outdated model from like 1664 with Rene Descartes coining Cartesian dualism and the Cartesian model. We know pain is a product of the brain, and just like happiness, it's a very real experience, but it doesn't mean it's not real. It doesn't invalidate anybody's experience. So when I started to look at it, I thought, well, yeah, actually, we're just a brain that floats in a dark tank, and we're pulling information in constantly, processing that information and figuring out what we want to do with it. So this must be a good place to start. And indeed, guys, it was a good place to start. So if you look at chiropractic care, I can tell you somebody who is going to probably get a lot of relief for chiropractic care. Let's say you got Steve, and he is 40, plays five-a-side on the weekend, and he really, really enjoys his football. Let's say he buys a new mattress and his back's been stiff for a bit, and then that slowly morphs into pain, and eventually chronic pain. Based on different factors like Steve's age, his sex, what's going to happen is he probably isn't very likely going to go to the GP. If he was a 64-year-old woman called Sandra, more than likely she would do, because she will have quite likely have had the GP for the same had the GP for like numerous years. Her kids will have seen it, because that's kind of how that works in that social context. But for Steve, and especially with him being male, he's probably not going to go to the GP. So Steve won't go to the GP, and he'll more than likely end up at a chiropractor's office, where the chiropractor will tell him, look, Steve, this is what's going on. Your spine's all misalignment, depending on if it is a subluxation theory kind of chiropractor. Remember, that's not the case at all. Steve's spine isn't aligned. His pain is complicated, and it's never down to one singular thing, especially with chronic pain. So if the chiropractor tells Steve, look, this is what's going on, that's information to his nervous system, which is going to go eventually to the brain, and his brain's going to log that. And if you imagine Steve has a little book in his head that is an encyclopedia of him, and it's where he stores his memories and kind of his beliefs and things like that, then that's going to get jotted down under the chapter, my back, misaligned. So when Steve gets on the table and the chiropractor does the adjustment, that's a lot of force into his nervous system. A lot of force which is probably going to activate nociception, a protection mechanism we have that informs the brain that there's noxious stimulus coming into the system. And based off this, your brain can either decide to produce pain or it can not bother. Because of what Steve knows at the time, and he probably feels quite safe with a chiropractor, and more than likely he knows what's going on, even though it's not what's really going on, then what's going to happen is the chiropractor is going to pop some gas out of his spine. His spine's going to be pushed into a position that it hasn't been into for a while. He's going to get some endorphin relief, and he's going to feel a little bit better. And when he gets off the table, he'll shake the chiropractor's hands, and he'll be told to walk for 15 or 20 minutes to let the adjustment set. In which case, when he's walking along the street, he's not going to be mechanically coupled. So a lot of people, when they're in pain, do something called mechanically couple. Their ribs and the pelvis lock down together, and they don't really counter-rotate when they walk. It's basically just a protection mechanism so you don't damage your back. However, he's not going to be doing this now because he's going to feel loose. Remember, subjective, feel loose. His spine is going to be exactly the same as it was before he got adjusted, minus a little bit of gas, which is probably going to come back in the next 20-30 minutes. And what's going to happen, he's going to walk up and down the street, counter-rotating, and he's going to feel a little bit good. When we counter-rotate, it lets us walk by using momentum, rather than kind of just constantly forcing your tissue to push you forward. Think if you were, or think before you were ill, guys, if you were to walk around an art museum, you would be wrecked after 2 or 3 hours. But if you went hiking for 2 or 3 hours before you got ill, you would be fine. It's because there's a difference in how you move when you do it. So Steve's more than likely going to think, you know what, I'm feeling pretty good. And he's probably going to start to introduce five-a-side again, slowly. He's going to get back to it. He has those social factors that are going to make him feel great. And he's going to slowly start to use chiropractic care as the catalyst that gets him better. So if you need to get from point A to B, you will drive. You'll drive your car. Your car's a catalyst. However, if we take 64-year-old Sandra, right, based off the variables we've discussed before, if she does get a bad back from, say, the mattress, being in a different position for a while, then she's likely to go to the GP. Based on Sandra's age, she is very likely to have some bulging discs because of her age. Remember, bulging discs don't necessarily cause pain. A massive percentage of the population have bulging discs without any pain. And in fact, most discs go back in by themselves without you doing anything. without you doing absolutely anything. The bigger they are, the better it is, because they'll go in quicker. There's a better chance of full recovery from them. And the same way our skin gets abnormality, so does our insides. Age and degeneration of the skin doesn't hurt. Why would the inside have to hurt, guys? So Sandra's going to go to the GP. He's going to probably image her after a while, and he's going to come back and say, wait, Sandra, you got 4 bulging discs. That's a big nocebo, opposite of the placebo effect. That gets logged in her book under her chapter, My Back. So after a while, she might go to the chiropractor, and the chiropractor is going to explain the same thing he did to Steve, and he's going to say, right, well, get on the bed and I'll do some adjustments, okay? So he's going to put the same information into her nervous system, as in the adjustment. Nociception, because it's quite a lot of pressure, is probably going to happen. Those kind of high threshold nerves are going to run up. Tell the brain, look, potentially dangerous stimulation coming into the body. Okay, noxious stimulus. Now, remember, this is nociception, it's not pain. Pain doesn't come in, your brain has to make it. So, if we look at it, more than likely her brain is going to go, right, what do we know about our back? Oh, well, actually, we've got bulging discs there now. And her brain's going to go, shit, we've got no, we need to get the hell off this table. We don't want to get any more damage. And she's very, very likely to produce pain as a protection response to get this chiropractor to stop putting pressure through her spine. So her output is going to be pain. And there's a lot of people who have been adjusted who feel pain afterwards. There's a lot of people who don't. There's a lot of people who get nothing. It isn't about the information that comes into the system. It's about what your brain does with that information. So, what I found when I was starting to look at different ways to get better, originally I had planned that I would be able to change myself. And I suppose that is still kind of true, but it's more along the levels now of I'm not bothered about what information I am putting into somebody's nervous system. I am bothered about what their brain is going to do with that information. If you have somebody who has back pain, then getting them to lift something up is probably going to get an output of pain. However, if you can put another information, another input into their system that helps to change what their brain does with that information, then what happens is, when they do the original input, say picking something up, you'll change the output. If you listen to this. That's me mumbling. That's an input to your nervous system. And basically, that means nothing to you. Your output is Adam is talking nonsense. I'll give you it again. Listen, guys. I'll come a bit closer to the mic. One more time for good measure. You've no idea what the hell I'm saying. However, if I give you new information now, okay, Ricky Martin is great. Remember the old Livin' La Vida Loca song, guys? Ricky Martin is great. And now I give you the original input. There's now words where there wasn't words before. So what's happened is you're absorbing and taking in the same information you did originally, but now you're assigning meaning to it, and your experience of that is completely different. It's a different output. If you can hear words where there were no words before, you can recover. That's the sure truth of it. And the thing is, recovery is about using a catalyst. So there was a woman who... So look, for Steve, the football player, chiropractic was a very, very good choice of catalyst for him. For Sandra, not so much. The variables between the information coming in and what her brain did with it, and then the output, was too much. So Sandra might be a little bit better off with maybe, say, something like yoga. Something more gentle, something less scary for her, where she can actually, her brain can experience her doing yoga. It might still produce a little bit of pain, but as long as she doesn't die or she doesn't get damaged, it's more than likely going to go, okay, well, maybe this is all right for us. And what you'll find is the next time she goes to the yoga class, she's going to get the same input being in the class, but she's going to process it slightly different because she now has a new past experience, which is that she didn't die from it, it didn't damage her, she didn't end up worse than when she started, okay? And people use all sorts of different catalysts to get better at the end of the day. There was a woman not so long ago who drank her own urine and it cured her fibromyalgia. Remember, fibromyalgia isn't a disease, it's a word. Brains produce pain, nothing else, guys. It's just a culturally adopted label, It's a very dangerous one at that, because everything will get prescribed to it. If you develop cancer and you end up with tumours growing inside of you, or kind of migraine, stuff like that, there's a good chance when you go to the doctors, they will just go, it's your fibromyalgia. That is not a good thing, guys. I've had a woman who had a spinal fluid leak, and that was what was causing her migraines, but they kept telling her it was fibromyalgia. Well, she had a quick blood patch, basically, where they inject a bit of blood into your spinal cord, and she never had a headache again. That 4 years of unnecessary migraines, which literally was cured in less than 30 minutes. Fibromyalgia is a very dangerous label. Education is key, guys. Education on pain is a great place to actually start. If you're driving your car and you break down in the woods and you don't have your phone on you, if you don't know anything about cars, there's a very good chance you're getting stuck in the woods. But if you're a mechanic and you break down in the woods, and you know the top 10 reasons why cars generally break down, then maybe you can check the air filter, you can check what might be going on. It is far easier to recover when you have the knowledge. So when it comes to catalysts, guys, and this is what I've been saying for ages, it's about using something specific to you that will facilitate the changes needed for you to get better. If you can't move because you're in so much pain, if you believe that your back is damaged, that you have loads of osteoarthritis, then if you educate yourself on pain, that is a great input into your brain to start showing your brain, actually, look, when the damage isn't what we think, it doesn't mean we're going to be in pain. Osteoarthritis. Osteo means bone, arth means joint, itis means inflammation, which would be fantastic if osteoarthritis was actually inflammatory, but it's not, it's degenerative. So for one, it's named wrong. They took 4,500 people in a study not so long ago. Some had hip pain, some didn't. And what they found was 80% of the people that did have hip pain didn't have any osteoarthritis. And more importantly, 85% of the people who did have osteoarthritis didn't have any pain. Damage does not correlate with pain, especially in a chronic capacity. So what I eventually started to do was to go a little bit deeper into this and create my framework. So rather than focusing on the things that I was trying to do it myself, I started on changing the neurobiological process in between. So I did, but remember, it's going to be different, a little bit different for everybody, because I see people who have ME and they have no pain whatsoever. So obviously pain education isn't going to be a great input, it's not going to do anything. But for them, and what they find helps a lot, is we go through things like ATP, how it's produced, how we show people that they're not a battery, because how you feel, fatigue-wise or pain, is not an adequate kind of representation of actually what's going on in the body. And the thing is, if you can break down the beliefs and the kind of neural tags in the brain that are responsible for kind of creating that output, and you can put some new ones in there, as in a new experience where they do something and they don't crash afterwards, then you can slowly break down the old stuff that you don't want in there, and you can slowly start building up the new stuff that you do want in there, until eventually you have somebody who's fully recovered. Remember, people are biological, psychological, and social. We are BPS animals at the end of the day. And your psychology, how you experience things, is just your brain's interpretation of your biology. And that can be changed and mediated by the social factors around you. If you have a good, loving family, well then it's going to make it a lot easier to recover. If you're by yourself, it's going to be a lot harder. Remember, your biological factors will affect your psychological. Your biological factors will affect the social aspects of your life, how you interact with people. If you snap at your husband or your wife, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your partner, whatever, the social factors will influence your biological factors. They will influence your psychological factors. It is a massive kind of free flow, free for all. Everything's affecting everything. And rather than focusing on just one thing, you really need to appreciate that you're made up of all of them. And the thing is, anything social you do is biological. It will create a biological response. Anything that is psychological will create a biological response. So, in the forms of catalyst, guys, I hope I've managed to explain this kind of enough. We do need to go a little bit more in depth because it does get super complicated. So if that's something you'd be interested in listening to, then by all means, send me an email and I'll cover it a little bit more in detail. But I do have a tendency to rabbit on, so I didn't want to kind of bore you guys too much with kind of different aspects of it. But yeah, I hope that helps to answer at least some of the people's questions. But as a quick recap, it's about finding, when I say catalyst, I mean the thing that will carry you to that recovery, because you can't get from here to France without a catalyst. It will either be an aeroplane, a car, a ferry, or perhaps even your legs, but you cannot get from point A to point B without that catalyst. And the same is true for recovery. You cannot hit that recovery point without something that will carry you there. And that is going to be different for everybody, because it's not about the modalities, it's about what your brain does with the information it receives from the person doing it. Therapeutic alliance is a huge thing, guys. If you are having treatment with somebody that you respect and you enjoy their company, and actually you really like them and you enjoy seeing them, there is a much better chance that modality is going to work for you, rather than somebody who you don't really like, somebody who you feel doesn't believe you, and things like that. So anyway, that's it from me, guys. Hope you've enjoyed that. Again, if you've got any questions, give me a shout. More importantly, if you want me to go a little bit deeper into that, because there is quite a lot to go through, shoot me a message and we'll do this as like a part 2. But take it easy, guys. Pleasure talking to you as always. See you on the flip side.